Box 5 and Hot 97 present Street Soldiers with Lisa Evers.
Welcome to this episode of Street Soldiers on racism in the fashion industry. For decades, fashion has used black culture to make established brands more popular. Now there are major moves to demonstrate Black Lives Matter all the way to the boardroom, and a trailblazing black supermodel is leading the way. Early on, it was obvious Beverly Johnson's beauty was intensified with that ineffable star quality called the X Factor. That was in the 1970s when supermodels were paid to be seen and not heard. But when legendary photographer Francesco Scabullo turned his famous lens on her exquisite features, the result was a Vogue magazine cover that made her the first black woman to earn the coveted fashion industry prize. It woke up the world and changed her life.
I really went on a self-journey. I really wanted to find out about my heritage more, racism, discrimination, what that meant and where we are, because it was so powerful, it was so impactful, that cover on the world.
When she realized what a huge accomplishment she'd achieved, she used her fame and her growing influence to champion civil rights causes and mentor black models.
They could look at somebody that looked like them and that they indeed are beautiful.
Even as she continued her own career path as a model, businesswoman, speaker, author, and creative director, she was aware of what she represented to women of color: hope that the dream can become real.
We want to be acknowledged, first of all, that we're human beings and that Black lives do matter. And next, we want to compete in the American, compete and be in the American dream.
Johnson says while there are more black fashion models today, women and men of color are still vastly underrepresented in key roles behind closed doors where major decisions are made. In an op-ed piece in the Washington Post, she detailed a solution and proposed the Beverly Johnson rule to open up interview opportunities.
We want 2 black professionals to be interviewed for any opening in the fashion industry. And we want that to go for the board of directors all the way down to the makeup artist, the hairstylist, the manicurist.
We brought together some top fashion industry insiders to find out what's really going on. Let's hear what our panel has to say. Joining us for this conversation is Valissa Vaughn. She is the PR manager for D2. Valissa, great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.
Thank you so much. Also with us is Adonis Basso. He's a model and musician and doing a lot of work to help the community as well. Adonis, great to have you with us.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Also joining us is Shia Douglas. She's a fashion designer and creative director. Shia, thank you so much for being with us.
Having me.
We really appreciate it. Valissa, I want to start with you because we've spoken with you about some of the representations that are happening in the fashion industry. And it seems now a lot of brands, we see them using the hashtag Black Lives Matter, that they want to commit themselves to diversity and inclusion and allow more opportunities for people of color. Is that just a trending slogan or is that really happening?
Well, I think that it is a bit trending in some terms. I do feel like a lot of people's kind of focus has begun to shift a bit. I do think that for the first time, at least in my life, that I feel like there has been a lot of change implemented.
Adonis, tell us about your experience because you work with many of the iconic brands, many of the top brands, been all over the world, seen all over the world. What's been your experience with racism in the fashion industry? How would you explain it to someone who doesn't quite get it?
Well, you see, I've been modeling for like 10 years, and I feel like a lot has changed. It was a slow change. For example, I started in 2007, so the industry was very different. A lot of times they were telling me they would only look for more European-looking kind of models and everything. And I remember then in 2012 when I started doing runways all around the world, from Paris and Milan and everything. Like I remember one time I went to a casting and they made me wait 2 hours under the rain and everything. And by the time I got in front of the client, they said, "Oh, we're not looking for black models." And that was a norm back then. But since, let's say, 2016, let's say the whole Black Panther movement from the movie, I feel like people have been more inclusive in the fashion but it's more of a money thing. I feel like people realizing the power of the black of the black dollar. So we have to they have to represent us to be able to like actually get that money. So which is what's explaining the shift. But I feel like it's a little bit trendy. I feel like nobody has really done a real impact, something that's really impactful to change yet.
No, that's a really important point in terms of the money issue. Shia, in terms of, we've heard this phrase that people say that the world loves Black culture, but they don't necessarily love Black people, because we see Black culture setting the trends in fashion, in sports, in music, in so many aspects of our lives that are being embraced by all kinds of cultures and all races all around the world. But yet there's still this racism, this underbelly that just doesn't seem to be addressed. Tell us what your experience has been like, and what do you see on this?
I have so many different experiences on different levels. One, to speak from an aspect of a creative designer or a creative director, working with music directors, working on sets, I can't stress how I've had to fight for inclusion and fight for representation on certain sets, in certain campaigns. There's been times where I've had to like literally pull directors aside and ask, like, you know, are there any issues? You know, I just want to make sure that we're being inclusive and we're being represented. I know that there are beautiful women of all colors, variations, from all walks of life. So, you know, me, especially as a Black woman, you know, I want to see women that look like me around, you know, as well. And so I definitely have found myself in positions where even when I'm working, I'm, you know, pushing that bar, and I'm pushing like, look, you know, this is not right. I'm not seeing, you know, the right thing here. So I want to address it while I'm here. So I think that that's very important when you're in these places and in these spaces, to encourage or try to have that change if you can, to like, yo, speak up on it at any point. That's the way that we're going to come to a level of understanding, you know what I'm saying? Or begin to come to a level of understanding. So that's my experience.
Melissa, in terms of the decision making and who makes the decisions, are you seeing, in terms of the, you know, when we would have conference tables, but now it's Zoom conferences, are you seeing more people of color making those decisions about what designs get approved, what models get hired as the face of a particular brand? Or what do you see happening there?
No, I'm not. And to be honest, to be brutally honest, you know, even working with some brands and some designers, I noticed that there are small Black designers that have small businesses that design, and major companies are stealing from those smaller businesses. And those are things that I notice, and those are things that I speak on as well. That's something that I've experienced myself with a major fast fashion brand. And
taking those ideas. But let me just bring Melissa into this. Melissa, from those meetings, from those high level meetings with these fashion executives, do you see that changing? Were you walking into rooms where you are the only person and only woman of color in there with a voice?
Yes, I'm pretty much the only. For the United States, it's myself and my coordinator who's under me. There are other Black people that work in Italy, but I've rarely ever seen them. I'm in the current position of trying to wrangle in D Squared and ask them to, you know, be more inclusive, to hear our voices in these decision-making times. I think that you have to kind of use the Black people that are in the room, that are with the company. I feel like this is deja vu, Lisa, because we had this diversity and inclusion conversation, last year? And a lot of these companies like run in and bring these diversity inclusion departments in and think that that's gonna save the day. But it's really not. It's really about educating one another within, and then you can make external movements. If you're not internally, you know, representing Black lives and understanding what that means from an internal space and having like Black people in the room, then the external message to me is just for that purpose, external law. It's just PR in that sense.
It's just a slogan. And also bringing people up all the way up, you know, from the entry level jobs to those medium level jobs. Adonis, what about you? When did you said things have changed, and I'm sure that gives other people a feeling of hope. It gives me a feeling of hope to see that it's changed. But there's always been the complexion issue in modeling, that the lighter skin models get more work as opposed to those with darker complexions. What were some of the things that started happening with your career where you're like, oh, okay, this is getting a little bit better?
Well, I remember, like I was saying earlier, back in around, let's say 2012, it was mainly when there was indeed a black model, it was mainly a light skinned model with a fro and everything. Even same thing for the female models. There's usually a certain skin tone that they wouldn't go. They would either get like the super dark girl to be like, oh, see, we have an African girl, or the mixed race model that's a little more ambiguous, so she's more attracted to a more broader demographic. And then I feel, like I said, around, let's say 2016, 2017, there was a lot more, like when I started, when we would never see a black model in Dior, you would never see a black model, like especially a male black model in Dior, Dolce, all these Versace, all these big brands. They didn't really support us when we're making these brands cool, really. Like all these rappers wearing these high fashion brands, we are creating the culture, but we're never necessarily represented, or when all these designers are creating all these designs and everything. But yeah, it was nice to see, like, oh, after a while, because I was one of the first models to do Dolce & Gabbana, and then it was nice to see that after me, they started using more and more models, because they're like, oh, this is selling. Like, people are actually buying stuff when we put my black models in. So yeah, it was nice to see.
So has any progress been made? We'll find out when we come back. Adonis, tell us about some of the stereotypes that you've run up against as you've pursued your highly successful modeling career.
Well, I feel like media has a certain image of the black man that it wants to push out. So I feel like that's, for the longest time, that's what the fashion industry was making sure to imply. So I feel like early in my career, that it was a very strong male, buzz cut and everything, super muscular, the dark skinned guy, or it was like the opposite, a little more softer guy with a lighter skin, with a little more hair and everything. So I remember that when I started growing my hair, for example, like they told me that, oh, it looks like a carpet, and like you shouldn't do that and everything, because those are the stereotypes and the white standards that like we live in the modeling industry, and that's the issue. That's why we need people like Lisa and Shaya, who are in higher places, so we get to, like, when we are represented and when people actually use us to put up their sales and everything, that there's actually people that look like us that are like in higher places to make sure that everything's actually like going the right way, so we're not being like exploited just for money.
Melissa, in terms of the ad campaigns and how important the ad campaigns and branding is for a particular design or a particular clothing line, how important is the person they pick to represent them?
I think it's very important. Even though we're in a space where we're seeing campaigns be more diverse than they ever have been, it still speaks to the consumer. And I think what Adonis mentioned was, it's really the biggest part of it is, I always ask my company, do you want to make money or do you want to be cool? And, there's a fine line between both. And, obviously everybody wants to be both, but the Black dollar is so powerful that, you're inspired by the culture, the music, the looks, so much that if that representation is not actually there, then that dollar will also be pulled. And I think that that's the most important thing, and that brands are going to, if they haven't begun already, that if they're not representing and they're not speaking to Black culture, then they will lose those Black dollars. And let's face it, we love high fashion, we love luxury, we love nice things. It's when you really just make it that simple, that the Black dollar is that important, brands will either have to recognize or close, in my opinion. So
that's a good one.
Shia, what about what Melissa is saying? Because it's also, there was a time when the white white culture, or the majority whites would not follow Black culture, but now it's the exact opposite. It's like they copy it, like Melissa was saying, they set the trend for everybody. What do you see happening in terms of women's fashion?
Oh, yeah. So for me, it's a total different experience. I have an experience from a creative directive side, and then from a fashion designer standpoint. Very early on, like high school years, I'd started a streetwear line, a women's streetwear line called Dimes Only. And at the time, that was, I want to say, freaking 15 years ago. This is pre a lot of the fast fashion streetwear brands, you know, that are around now. And, you know, my experience for me during that time, being of that culture, living that life, growing up, everything that I lived, I put into what I was wearing. And that was super important for me. Not only was it the representation, but it was the story and the narrative that was genuine. And I feel like that's extremely important. And which is why, going back to my last point, it's important to include people like us on these boards, in these meetings, in these decision-making processes, because not only do we have the creativity, we have the element, we have the fashion, the everything, the spunk, but it's just necessary in terms of connecting and making it authentic, you know, and making it an authentic thing, you know, like you can't sell streetwear and not have a person of color on your design team. Like, you know, you can't sell me to me.
Melissa, what about it? Is there as much influence on women as there is with men in terms of the music industry and the hip hop culture?
Absolutely. I think across the board, I really don't think it's segmented as much as you would think. I think brands have departments that just literally are studying what they see. They're replicating it. They're making it their own, if you will. Mashia mentioned earlier, they're not always even getting credited necessarily for these designs that end up coming into, you know, life. But I think across the board, our culture is just drives so much in so many different ways that we see it transcending all levels: men's, women's, children, sports, acting. I think that it's across the board.
In terms of the trends for women, what trends do you see for women that are happening right now?
I obviously do. We all spoke on how we are seeing a lot more support of Black and brown women. We are seeing representation of the color variety, whether it's in cosmetics, whether it's in fashion, whatever. We are seeing that. And whether it's by ways of trend or by ways of authenticity, for me, I'm appreciative to experience it and see it, you know, like regardless for me, the state of what's happening right now, obviously it's just, it's a relief to see. It's sad of what everything, you know, what it took for us to be able to start to see some of these results. Yeah, but I can't say that it's not refreshing to see, whether it is, you know, temporary, you know, it's something that I'm happy to see.
Adonis, in terms of the men's fashion, where can it go? I mean, what do you see ahead? Because I'm sure you're in contact with a lot of people that are right there on the cutting edge. What do you see ahead for men?
Well, I feel like we're just gonna keep inspiring fashion, because just now, like, streetwear has become like a high fashion thing. You know, it's just been recent and like, oh, now you have, like I said, the $1,000 sneakers and the $1,000 basketball shorts. You know, so like those are all trends that we've created. So I feel like nothing's really gonna change, even if it's like us getting a little more clean, or like, cause like now you can wear a suit with expensive sneakers. So I feel like, as long as like you stay creative and you stay yourself, like, man, fashion could go anywhere. But I know that like we're still gonna be on the forefront of deciding what it's gonna be.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Street Soldiers. We look forward to the day when equality for everyone is our reality. Remember, use your mind, it's your best weapon. I'm Lisa Evers. Let's push for peace, love, and justice for all.